Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be discussing, as well as analysing, tech news which, as usual, has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. Hopefully, you're having an amazing day. We have lots of stuff to get through in today's video. I'd like to start things out, though, with a small thing for AMD, and that is Navi 2X. An alleged set of specifications has been floating around the internets the past 24 or so hours, and Hassan over at WCCF Tech actually tweeted what he'd been sent. I assume the same source has sent the same thing to multiple people, and as I said, it's popped up in multiple places. I'm only going to spend a few seconds discussing this because honestly I'm rather skeptical, as is Hassan, over the specs. The die size is 427mm square, which is way smaller than what we've been hearing. It has been about 500mm square plus for the highest end SKU in RDNA 2 lineup. And the clock frequency too is a bit weird, with the typical clock frequency looking to be 2050 megahertz with a boost frequency of 2150. Perhaps here they're referring to the game clock speed and the highest boost speed, but to put this into some level of context, if we look at the first generation RDNA based RX 5700, it has a base frequency of 1605, the game clock of 1755 and a boost of 1905. So perhaps here the typical clocks would actually be the game GPU clock. So maybe that's what they're referring to. I'll get into the CU in just a moment. 128 ROPS, which is a lot. 384-bit memory interface and 310 watts for the boost. But on average will take 285 watts of energies. And I did mention I'd get into the CU. I have to say that my eyebrow raised quite considerably when I saw that it was 2x36 cluster groups. So basically they're saying that there are two clusters here, and each of these clusters has 36 compute units, which is kind of weird just how WGPs and SAs work on RDNA. But furthermore, even taking that technical stuff out of the equation, from everything we've heard so far, including what I'm hearing, it's up to 80 compute units on RDNA 2 flagship. With that said, maybe this is the lower end SKU, or maybe AMD are getting crappy yields or some other thing and they've decided to cut the number, and maybe this also explains why they've reduced the size of the die. Maybe they've gone with a smaller die compared to the earlier engineering samples or the earlier plans. But it wasn't too long ago we saw a leaked benchmark, this was back in January, February, where the performance was about 30% faster than an RTX 2080 Ti. So I still believe that these specs are probably not accurate. However, I do think that most likely, in terms of traditional rasterization performance, we're probably going to be looking at a GPU that's at least 40% faster than Turing, based on the fact that RDNA 1, with those specific benchmarks that leaked, had very early engineering sample, probably crappy clock frequencies and some errors on the actual silicon itself, but also the fact that the drivers weren't exactly top-notch, and obviously AMD will have had time to improve the drivers by the release, or at least the most that AMD can improve their drivers anyway. And sorry, that was a bit mean, I just couldn't resist the driver joke. And also, everything I'm hearing, AMD have drastically increased the performance of RDNA 2. I'm also hearing that the RDNA 2 CUs do more work as well. I've discussed the IPC gains and also the efficiency gains in a couple of videos, a couple of exclusive in the past, and AMD have confirmed that too, that RDNA 2 does have improved IPC. Long story short, I think that there's going to be a significant improvement with RDNA 2 or Navi 2X. After all, I was the one who originated the NVIDIA killer leak. But I do think that Ampere is going to also be a pretty tremendous GPU. However, I'm not sold on these specs. But what we can also talk about briefly is the Pro Threadripper lineup, because now we actually have some official slides that have been provided, and because the confidentiality of these slides is now over. The embargo date is lifted, and there isn't much to say about these that hadn't already leaked, basically. 8 memory channels supporting DDR4 3200. We have 128 PCIe 4 lanes, which I can't really say anything to that. It's just crazy to me. Absolutely crazy that we're at this position in computing that, you know, that's possible. I really can't say anything more about that. AMD Pro Security, Manageability, and Business Ready, at least according to the slides. And yeah, basically all of the leaks were accurate. The clock frequency for the highest end SKU is up to 4.2 gigahertz. With 64 cores, 128 threads. Although these have been officially announced, we don't know the release date yet, and we certainly do not know the prices. Another thing that's worth noting is that finally AMD don't have that piddly memory configuration issue. Honestly, that was one of the big problems with the 3rd generation Threadrippers, but now we can have up to 2 terabytes of memory. I know that not everyone needs that, but once again, if you're doing huge data sets, scientific research, that type of thing, memory can get nommed in just a few seconds. And yeah, it's looking to be an impressive lineup of processors. It's going to be interesting to see what AMD actually chooses to charge for this. To put it mildly, I don't think that this thing is going to be cheap. And it's also going to be fascinating to see how well it performs against the standard lineup of Threadripper, given it has that additional set of memory channels. And now from AMD everything to Intel, as there is something very curious that has emerged regarding Intel's Alder Lake processors, which of course will be the next generation Intel CPUs, which will obviously succeed Rocket Lake. We have Comet Lake now. Then we'll see Rocket Lake either late this year or more realistically early next year, and then Alder Lake will be, well, after that, so probably late 2021, possibly 2022, but I'm guessing it will be 2021 for the Alder Lake CPUs and platforms, and they will be based on Golden Cove as well as Gracemont, because now we have basically confirmation that Intel will be using hybrid technology for its upcoming processors. You can read on screen yourself this particular documentation, which Intel have accidentally let the cat out of the bag with. This was actually spotted by website Zihi. Hopefully I've pronounced that correctly. And all of this was in Intel's hybrid technology brief, which is actually a PDF, which is available as of the time I'm recording this video, but maybe in 30 seconds from now it will be scrubbed from the internets. Either way, according to this information, the following instruction sets are available only when the big cores are enabled. This basically means that AVX512, FP16 and so on support are not supported on the little cores, which has interesting ramifications for the desktop. I honestly would be super curious how this would function on a Windows desktop system. Unfortunately, we don't have enough information here on how this functions exactly. For example, do you need to do anything specific to have applications kind of choose specific workloads? How will Windows schedule various workloads too on the desktop environment? Big.LITTLE is obviously something that you would expect more on like a tablet or a smartphone or what have you. And what happens if you have an application like, I don't know, like a 3D rendering on a CPU, which theoretically could spill over to those additional cores? Can the little cores help? Or can they only help if it's not using a specific instruction, like AVX 512 would be like, nope, 8 cores only for you, my friend. But if it's not using AVX 512, I know that there's other instructions, but I'm just saying that for my sanity. Can that then be leveraged over all cores? Because FP16 is more of an AI thing, AVX 512, blah, blah, blah. So theoretically, if this is the only difference between the cores, and once again, there's a crap ton of questions here, I could actually see this being kind of cool. But what about IPC differences? And we just don't know. There's a lot of questions. Like, are there even clock frequency differences between the cores? It's very interesting. I'll also say that because we're going to be seeing the LGA 1700, I was about to say 1200, LGA 1700 socket, allegedly there will also be DDR5 support. So memory bandwidth will certainly be a lot higher for the next generation. It's going to be just weird, I think, over the next couple of years to see how the companies shift in direction. And now onto some console-related stuff. The first of which is that Thursday, this week, at 2 PM ET, the Gears of War developers will be covering both Gears Tactics and Gears 5 for the Xbox Series X. And allegedly, we will learn a lot more about the Xbox Series X implementation of the Gears 5. And of course, the real big announcement is going to take place the 23rd, which will be the following week. So this Thursday, which is the 16th, they're going to go over some of the Gears 5 stuff, some of the technical information, and then the week after that, which of course is the 23rd, is going to be the really big reveal for Microsoft, where we're going to finally see the Xbox game showcase. I don't know if Microsoft are going to reveal all of the games that they're working on. Honestly, I still kind of suspect that they're going to hold some stuff back. Maybe games which are really early in development, or they don't feel that they need to show yet. And honestly, it's always good to have a couple of cards, or games, I guess in this case, in your back pocket for obvious reasons, because you don't know what your competitors are going to do. And the rumour has it that the Xbox showcase will just show games. There will be no mention of pricing, and there will be no mention of Lockhart, and this will be something that happens in August. I wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft also chooses to show a really big game in August as well, to try to solidify this and to really hype up the announcement. So there'll be like a couple of big games in July, and then like another big game in August, and so on and so on. And then, of course, there are games that they may keep for like later on in the year, or possibly early next year, which are probably still being worked on now. But shifting directions from the hardware side of the equation, there is something, well, I guess technically this is still hardware related too, and this is Unreal Engine for next-gen games. It's a video which has popped up on Epic's own YouTube channel, or more specifically the Unreal Engine YouTube channel. There are a couple of really interesting gems here. I've already gone over the Unreal Engine 5 demo that we saw for the PlayStation 5, the Lumen demo, and honestly, I said at the time that I'm extremely excited for what UE5 is going to bring to the table. There are a couple of reasons behind this, not least of which because it's not going to just be good for games. With things such as Nanite, the fact that you can pull in so much detail so easily, and also it makes things a lot easier for developers as well. You can have a situation where you don't need to create models with loads of different LODs. You can basically just offer the model in high quality, and then the engine, depending on what's going on, like distances from the camera, blah, 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 can scale the model and do whatever it needs to, all in real time. And this is going to be awesome for games, but it also will allow different forms of media to probably percolate. And this is going to be really cool for things like augmented reality, but also interactive media as well. I wouldn't be surprised if there is going to be some type of new tech which starts coming out, especially as VR starts to become normalized, where we can have more interactive methods of like films where you can kind of almost look around on a scene. Imagine, just for the sake of argument, that there's like I know, like a gladiator combat. I don't know why this popped into my head, but just imagine there's like a gladiator fighting, I don't know, another gladiator, and you're like almost in the arena, and you could kind of turn your head around, and this would be all under VR. That would be kind of an interesting experience where you're not being active necessarily in terms of the result. You're not controlling a character, so it's not like a game, but it's also not like a movie either, where obviously you don't choose where the camera's looking, whereas in this case you're kind of a passive observer in the world. And I think that that type of stuff is going to be very much possible in the next couple of years. I'll talk about this maybe more in a future video. I have a couple of video projects I'm working on at the moment, including a 30 FPS, and whether it's going to be let's say a feature for the next generation or not. But speaking of 30 FPS, getting back to my point, I've just done a massive circle there. Nanite performance and Unreal Engine. There's a couple of very interesting takeaways here. So this will actually push me to update my UE5 video, although I'll link the one that I've already done in the video description, because a lot of this is still pertinent. It's just that Epic have now started to solidify and provide a bit more information on certain features. So, according to them, the average resolution was 2496 by 1404 with the Nanite demo that they've shown. However, it's being upsampled to 4K using TAAU. And this is 4.5 milliseconds to output the G-Puffer. Now, apparently, they can now hit 60 Hz for the games, which is actually really impressive. With the PS5 demo that we saw, it was locked at 30, but what they had done is, it could actually hit 45-ish FPS, but they'd locked it to 30. And furthermore, with the Lumen, which is obviously the hardware-based ray tracing, they've said that the performance at the moment is hitting 30 FPS budget on the next generation consoles, so that is Xbox and PlayStation, but they are still tweaking things, they're still improving things, and they think by the time the engine launches, it's most likely going to be possible to hit games at 60 FPS. Now, I will stress that this is still work in progress, because when they put together the Lumen demo, A, the game engine itself, UE5, was still quite early, and B, they were working on non-final PlayStation 5 development kits. It's still being worked on, as always. So, just small subtle tweaks in efficiency when you start to improve, multiple areas, can quickly start to make a difference in the performance of the hardware. Now, this is not UE5 based, but another interesting tidbit from this, from the wording they used, it seems like the Hellblade 2 demo that we saw was actually being run in real time on the Xbox Series X hardware. And I don't find that honestly too surprising. Quite a few people are surprised that the Xbox was doing that in real time, and I'm not, given that it was a cutscene. To my knowledge, and I may be incorrect here, but to my knowledge, this demo was actually more impressive, not because necessarily it was being done in real time, but the hardware itself, the development kit for the Xbox was not as far along perhaps as what you would have hoped at that point. It was still quite early. So for them to have actually managed to hit that on a Hellblade 2 at that point, using quite honestly not exactly final development kits for the Xbox Series X, at least in my opinion, is actually very impressive. This engine won't launch until early 2021 for a preview for developers. However, the target release date for the final revision of UE 5.0 is going to be late 2021. So we're looking at an engine which is not going to ship until minimum, once again, the final revision, minimum of 1 year from now, realistically probably closer to, let's say, 14 to 16 months from now. So They've still got a long way to go in terms of the efficiency, features that are being implemented, but I think that this engine is going to be really, really cool. With all of that said though, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. The normal stuff, like, share, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.